Recycling Corporate Affairs meeting to order. I'm going to ask Mr. Gray to do the invocation for us, and Ms. Greaves will do the pledge of allegiance.
Would you stand with me, please?
Bow your heads. Our gracious Heavenly Father, let us deliberate, or help us deliberate over some of the business of Horry County, for we ask this in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can you hear me now? Yes. Just like this old saying, are we there yet?
Yeah.
Well, good morning. Thank y'all for being here. I got the swat already.
Just about. Just about.
I called this meeting this morning. What I've got on the agenda is fairly short. The WasteCom conference update. And what I wanted to do, I had some slides sent out. I wanted to present some of the information that we saw at the international conference. The conference was new for me. It was the first conference. It was a major conference. There were about 2,000 people there from 72 nations. So they gave out a lot of information. A lot of that information was pertaining to international things, but the big theme I saw around it was recycling, and so I wanted to share some of the data that we had gotten about recycling to see if there's anything that we can pick from that that may help us, as because we know that recycling is one of our major challenges and one of the things that we can do. I apologize up front for the quality of the slides. When I looked at them on my phone, they looked great. That was my first go-around about trying to do filming, but they look good on the phone, but when we tried to print them, they didn't come out that good. And Pam was there, so she can chime in at any time that she feels like and help with this. But the slides that I sent to you, the first one, they talked about the challenges. And another thing, now I'm not an expert on these slides, so if you got a lot of questions about them, I took them off as the presentations were being done. So I'm going off of memory of some of the things that they said, but the numbers will reflect what it is. And that's the thing that I want you to look at, is that the numbers. And when you look at the challenges, what they were saying is that 30% of the packaging need to be redesigned. And if you know that we had conversations around this table about packaging being redesigned. They talked a lot about circular intervention rather than linear. So they wanted to start with package redesign, which says 30% of packaging need to be redesigned. I thought it was interesting that we had a lady there from Mars, the candy bar, the sneaker bar people who makes the candy wrap, and they're getting involved in packaging redesign. And I'm assuming the redesign of the package is something that we can either biodegrade or something that can be reused in recycling. It's some of the things that they were trying to do. But if you look at the slides, you can't read most of it, but if you look at page number 4, I guess it is, if you look at this red corridor down here, the big thing that I see there, it says that we need to be headed to 50% in recycling, which means that half of what we use in plastics or whatever needs to be able to be recycled. And so one of the challenges is, I think, that they were trying to get to that point.
I was really thrilled to see that this was the keynote speaker.
Yeah.
And the panel that they had on this, because every conference for the last 4 or 5 years that I've been to, when they ask for comments, and you're trying to solve a problem. To me, if you're trying to solve a problem, you have to go all the way back to its origin. So if everything that I've always put on there, and I'm sure this didn't have a thing to do with them having this as a keynote speaker, because I did, but if we can go back to, there's 3 or 4 big manufacturers of this that handle these packaging, and if they will do what the keynote speaker, and to me that tells me that international and national SWANA is having a conversation with these people because they had the lady when the Mars that presented one of these. If we can get them to either make the packaging to be recyclable or compostable, then that makes our job an awful lot easier. And it goes from all the way to this, because we can only get so many people at a period of time to recycle, and we can only get so much political will to allow us to ban something from that landfill. And if we can do percentages of each of that, and then they make that where we can choose to do that, that'll pretty well solve our problem. So I was thrilled
Yeah,
that this
I was
was
really thrilled that they printed it and presented it in that way that you could see. And I don't know if you can read some of these, so I'm not gonna go through all of these, because some of them are just, you can't really see them.
I'd like to
that well.
ask you a question.
Go ahead, ask me a question, Mr.
Oh, thank you. Got to eat it, ain't
You got to eat it, yeah. You got to be down your throat. Go ahead.
it? Did you say there were 72 nations represented
That's what they said.
and 2,000 people?
2,000 people.
From those, and where was it held?
It was held at, in Baltimore.
Oh, yeah, the Inner
Yeah.
Harbor there.
Yeah, at the Inner Harbor.
And your big take back, and I'm sure that of Pam and everybody else, was a focus on recycling.
It was a major focus on recycling. I brought a copy of the agenda, but there were a lot of other things that they focused on that were kind of international, redeveloping countries and how to help those countries. We had people there from Argentina. In fact, a lady sat to the table with us from Argentina. But what you hear, Mr. Gray, was that everybody was having the same problem with recycling. It's not just common to Horry County. It is an international problem. And I brought some statistics about marine pollution and the amount of trash that's in the ocean that we thought was really interesting. But the major theme was how do you cut this down? How do we get rid of this? Because if we're talking about an increase in population, you're naturally talking about an increase in more garbage that you got to get rid of.
Well, I'm sure you all saw this. One of the emails coming through, I think it was Waste, but it wasn't Waste Management. It was just a magazine called Waste. But anyway, they talked about China was revisiting again what they're going to take in as waste that's good for their nation. And commentary was that a likely outcome was that whatever they're taking in now, they're not going to take it in anymore, or cut way back. And of course, that would reverberate all the way back to us. I don't know if this is a good time to talk about that, but
I think it is, and Mike come up and you can talk about it. It's already reverberating. It's already here. You've got to have a place that these products can go to.
Right.
Talking about the plastics, one of the few years back, there was a lady lawyer that was representing the plastic companies, packaging companies, and she was presenting a beautiful picture. But there was people in the audience knew that was certain packaging that couldn't be recycled, couldn't be reused, so they got down on her pretty hard. And her final statement that I brought away from that, well, we have to produce what our customers want. Now, the attitude is kind of flipping when you have Walmart that says, you're not going to take an item that's an inch by inch and put it in a 3-foot box. You're going to do this, or we're going to go someplace else. That's where the pressure's coming to. But yeah, we've got tons and tons and hundreds of bales of plastic that we can't even give away. We've been selling it for almost nothing, but we were getting rid of it. It wasn't going in the landfill.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got it stacked up outside now at the MRF. So Mike, tell them a little bit what we're going through on cardboard. Something that we never really had a big problem with, moving.
We, this month, we sold a cardboard and emailed to the buyer that, we, wanted to make sure he could take what we had, because we had a lot already in storage, and that we generated about a load and a half of cardboard a day, into things. I think right now, in fiber, we got over 42 loads sitting on the floor, stuffed in every corner. We typically don't stack them at 5 high. We've had to go 6 high. If we don't have some room by Monday, I'm gonna start putting them in the parking lot and covering them up and wrapping them, because we just don't have any more room on the inside. The buyer called us day before yesterday and said, we don't know that we're gonna be able to get rid of any of it. So we had a conference call yesterday to try to encourage him to take it. Now, what you have going on is this is where contract things come good in the bad times, contracts with somebody to take it. So, because we sell ours on the open market and get a better price for it, we not got anybody under contract forcing them to take the material. So we're doing everything we can to get rid of it. The buyer basically has put us on hold and don't know if we can, gonna be able to get rid of it. We should know sometime this morning of how much he's gonna be able to take at that point in time.
Is that related to this China article?
It is, everything going to China, even though our quality material is one of the highest in the Carolinas, we're still having a hard time getting it to China, because they issue permits to each plant over there of how much material they can take in export-wise. The government does. And what they've done is only allowed 2 or 3 plants to take in the material. The plants that are putting a lot of emissions out, they ain't issuing permits to them. They are, if you buy cardboard, now what's happening is everybody in China is trying to buy as much cardboard as they can to keep their mills running from within China, within the country of China. And cardboard prices in China are selling for $500 a ton, because the demand is so high.
How can we get that?
The question is how long can China stand not allowing material into the country, and watch their cardboard prices internally continue to go up?
You know, it was interesting, and I don't remember exactly which presentation. And then we were talking with, there was a man from China that did a presentation. He had to have an interpreter.
Yeah, right.
But one of the things that, not interesting, really stunned me, was someone dealing with that said China only recycled 3% of what was in their country, but yet they buy ours. I'm not sure I understand that reasoning.
Well, obviously it's cheaper for them to buy it at the price
Ours
they're giving us
than to
it is.
recycle their own.
Yeah.
But for a country to be buying what this nation sends them and only recycle 3% of their own is, and of course it's not a democratic country. The guy can say you got to give it to them. They don't have to pay you anything. That was a shock to me. I don't really quite comprehend all that.
What's the bigger shock, if you think of it this way? The green fence came up because we were sending them shoddy stuff. Yeah. People were sending them bales of stuff, might be supposed to be cardboard, and half of it wasn't cardboard. But if they've now have cut the flow going in because it's not clean, and then you look at their own country where they're not cleaning up their own material, that's kind of, I think there's more going on with this market stuff than plastics and than paper. I think it's got a lot to do with the politics, and we'll show you and we'll close it down. And they've got everybody in the damn world's attention right now because of this market situation. But we'll continue to do what we can do. And Mike says, you know, at bad times like this, if you got a contract with somebody, might have been making less money back, and when you bid it every month, every time you get a load, the competition's there. But if you had ABC company under contract, and we're gonna take so much, and if they can't get rid of it, they gonna fold up. They not gonna continue to take the stuff and pile it someplace and then can't get rid of it. So I think you have to judge which way is the most suitable for you, and we'll just.
Yeah, I talked to, and there was an article also that came out that said that Sunoco hasn't sold any. They don't do what we do. We do ONP, which is old newspaper. So it's not contaminated. Our contamination runs less than 1% in our bale. If you take a bale apart and do an audit on it, it runs less than 1%. The national average is 3% for ONP that is recycled, that is a grade 8, which is some of the highest grades you can get and get the highest dollar for. Sunoco just, they don't take the browns out of it. A lot of the browns, it's got a lot of browns, there's a lot of contamination in it, and they sell it as mixed paper. Well, in that article, they said that they hadn't sold any mixed paper in over a month, and no new market, did not know of any markets in the United States or outside the United States that was taking it right now to the current places they are shipping. They're looking at shipping to South America now. So they're definitely looking for different markets, but they sent all of their MRF operators from all three, from North and South Carolina to our MRF to spend a couple hours on my MRF to see how we done it, because their operators said there was no way they could do it. Now, we run more people than they do on the line, and we probably don't run the line as fast as they do, but we generate a higher grade of paper.
Well, I
And
believe.
even the higher grade ain't helping us right now.
Yeah. I believe, obviously, for the international to have keynote speakers, and a lot of their presentations were around packaging and what needed to be done, that they see this in the future. Right now, it's a bad problem. It's a costly problem. And to me, I was looking at some emails. I think some people were saying that they were going to have to vote again on this packaging bill that was defeated. And I think this bill was only defeated by one person. So obviously our politicians in Columbia are pretty well down the middle on voting for this or not. And I think it's coming back up. And it would be, I think our county organizations and our city organizations and public landfills like we are need either through committees or staff to educate our politicians in where we are, because for us not to be able to sell material that we have sold before and made money on, and then for us to have to put it in the landfill and lose airspace and have to buy buildings to store this in, you're getting into hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars and quite a bit of airspace. And whether it's through our lobbyists or what we need to do, not only do we not need to have this bill passed, but we need for them to look at the money it is costing just us, but every county in this state so that they can understand that they need to look at some of these problems in a different light. And I guess we've been educating children for many years. Maybe we need to start educating grown-up children to what it is costing this state.
But, you know, it's interesting, and I don't know if I printed that slide, but they did print some of the slides that shows the lost revenue of the cost of having to do what you're just saying, and it's in the billions of dollars when they're not doing that. But Mike, let me ask, is China the only market that we were shipping our cardboard to?
A lot of you can ship to India and Indonesia as well. The buyers don't like to ship to India and Indonesia because they have a hard time getting their money. What happens is when it gets there, they find some reason to downgrade it and do chargebacks to you. And we even had one last year that tried to do it went to Indonesia, tried to the picture that they sent us was 3 stacks of cardboard. And it looked like somebody had just poured water on top of it and it run down the sides of it. And then they tried to do a chargeback to us, and I just said, we didn't load it like that. I ain't paying it. So the buyer had to eat it.
When we load it, we take pictures
Right.
before they seal it. Mike started another process now that when a bale comes off the line, the supervisor puts his name on it. And then if it gets someplace and it's contaminated or something, we got a record of who's done it. Now he's gonna even start the process of who bailed it. Supervisor might be over someplace, but the guy that, when it comes out of the baler, he's gonna put his name on it. But we're doing everything that we can possibly do to pull everything out that we've got a market for. Mike told me last week that the containers, the roll-off containers that some of the big companies discard, well, we can't get rid of that heavy plastic now, the buckets and these containers and stuff like that. But he's found a market for these containers if there's no metal in them, wheels and axles and handles and stuff like that. So they're gonna go back through these bales, break them, pull those things out, and found this market that someone will take that stuff. So he's doing everything he possibly can to pull it out. But it's the end product. If you'll just go and price the difference between a patio plank that you put down on a patio, get the price of wooden plank versus a plastic plank, with all this plastic stuff, you would think that they would be pretty close in price. They don't come no place being close at all. So it's gonna be the markets where this stuff ends up and how it's used, and but there's a lot of it there. We pull in a lot out. We're gonna continue to do that. But the end product is a problem.
What bill were you speaking of that we would lobby?
The bill that was there last year where the manufacturers wanted our people in Columbia to ban local people banning the plastic bag or banning any kind of packaging.
If the bill would keep a local government from putting restrictions on plastic bags, carry out, food trays and stuff like that. The state says that they should be the only ones that would pass a law to restrict any kind of thing like that. Clemens is the one that, and our people was the one that pushed this bill in last year. But that would say Isle of Palms, should not have passed that ordinance
Yep,
on the
Foley
bag.
Beach. Foley Beach passed one.
And it shouldn't be the local government that restricts those type things. It should be state government. Now, if you think the people in Columbia cares about the local government and in what it's costing, just look at what it's costing on TVs.
Electronics, yeah.
Yeah, it's costing Odie County, what, $700,000 a year to get rid of TVs?
But if the bill, who's pushing the bill? Who,
Clemens, was the one that put it in last year, and I guess
I
he's
mean,
still
what,
on
you talking about Allen and
it.
Clinton?
Yeah,
What industry, what would happen if the bill passes? Local governments would be able to do something?
couldn't,
We couldn't.
could not do it.
Yeah, they don't want us to be able to.
Yeah. Okay, well, who's he representing?
Don't, have no idea. But, you've got people in this state that, manufactures millions of plastic bags.
Well, of course, Sunoco makes those, don't it?
It's the
And
the
others.
plastics company, it's the people that makes the food, shells, it's
Okay, I
a
see.
lot of people. It's the same thing if, a bottle bill, if you wanted to pass a bottle bill in Horry County restricting, those types, you wouldn't be able to do it. It would have to be on the state level.
Okay.
And when you say bottle bill, it sounds great. People our age that come up used to fight over a bottle on the side of the road, but you just start talking about one, and then Budweiser gets in it, and Coca-Cola, and everybody gets in it, and food, everybody, because they don't want the headache of having to pay for them things when they come back in.
Yeah.
So it's the lobbyists,
But somebody's got to pay for it. And unfortunately, you look seriously at I know Horry County's not small necessarily, but it is. It's a small county. And you look at what it is costing the county and the cities and the people, $700 and some thousand just to get rid of electronics. That's absurd. That's almost $1 million. And if you added some other things and how many's been in the landfill and what the pollution is and how that has to be done, it would truly figure would be more than that in one area. So, if you look at the plastics, what it costs us to have those plastic bags picked up, what it costs us to have people crawl in there and cut them out of our working equipment, cogs and things that we do, you're looking at another $100,000. You look at the other styrofoam that we can't recycle that goes in that landfill and what it costs us in landfill space. So now you're really over $1 million in 3 different things that just go in this one small landfill. And if you did that over a state level, look at what our people in Columbia could do if they understood where we are here and would work with that. Look what it would save South Carolina.
When you say our people, you mean our delegation or to the General Assembly as a whole?
Ours should be working for us and should be working in the general delegation to help us not have these costs and not have this in the landfill. They don't need to be against us. They need to be for us.
But the general premise is that we'd like to, as a local government, we'd like for local governments to be able
To ban
Ban-
whatever we choose.
certain things that
Right.
going into the landfill, and there are people on the other side that say, no, we don't want local governments to do that.
That's right.
We want it to be statewide when, in fact, what their real motivation is, we just want to kill it altogether, one would presume.
Yeah. And if it is costing us locally the money, we're the one paying the money, why shouldn't we be able to get that information, take it to our county council, our League of Cities, and say, guys, this is what it's costing you. This is what it's costing the people, the taxpayer here.
Well, I'm gonna nominate you to pick up that banner and march right.
I've done that before, and I can do that again. Dan, thank you. That will not be a problem.
The thing I saw too is that the European countries seem to have a better working relationship with the politicians in getting this done. And that's evident if you look at your chart on page 8. It shows you how many landfills, the percentage of landfills in the United States versus landfills in Europe in the recycling aspect. So it says that at least the politicians in those countries, and they spoke a lot in political terms, or agreeing to some of the problems that they see worldwide. And so this, I thought that was an interesting chart that you could look at to see. And if you look at on the following page, on page 9, it's the same thing that shows you how much we recycle, but how much we also put in the landfills.
You're right. The international people, their politicians work with them very closely on environmental issues and on monetary issues.
Right.
And if the landfills were telling them they had these problems, they were helping them solve it. And we're all going to have to work together to be able to solve that.
And I think that the guy he was from France, Viola, is the one that gave a lot of the presentations and a lot of these slides that you see in here. I think the slide on page 7 kind of talks to what they're trying to do in front is recycling. And this is a slide from Viola. They had a very good, he had a very good presentation about how that they were trying to bring recycling and get it in, and this was their game plan.
Where are they out of?
They're out of France.
Huh?
France.
It was amazing, and it was difficult to understand some of these guys because they were way up on a stage and they were talking through microphones, and they could speak English, but they had a heavy accent, French, Italian, Chinese, Australian, whatever. But it was amazing the priority actions and things that they had, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And we're doing these. We're going to do them.
Yeah, yeah.
There's no question. It's just going to be done. And it expedites what people are doing. It cuts cost, and it works.
I've come to the conclusion that in Europe and the foreign countries that's doing all this good stuff, got these high rates, they must not allow lobbyists in the country.
Smart
probably not.
people. Smart people.
Well, you can see the results of not having that there. But I really, you can read in the other slide, and I think it's on page 10, and I'm going to just give you these numbers because they're kind of blurred, but you can read through it. When you look at the recycling rates, you can see where we fit. Germany is at 65%, we're at 35%, even Australia is like 41%, in South Korea, so they're doing like 59% of recycling versus where we are. Most of the stuff that we're still doing is landfill kinds of things. And they went into a whole lot of things, and I'm not going to get in because, like I say, I'm not an expert on their slides, but I thought it had a real reverberating now about, they talked about climate change and how landfills contribute to the emissions in the air that has climate change and those kinds of things. So I guess, and I brought back like a whole lot of books, so once I read all these books and I come back to this next meeting, Dan, you can ask me a whole lot of questions about emissions and that kind of stuff. But I did realize that, with the methane gas and all of the things that are being emitted from landfills, they do have a problem with climate change because they affect our ozone and that kind of stuff. And these are one of the things that they're trying to eliminate. So I'm not going to be an expert on these slides. I just wanted you to see the numbers and get a feel from the conference. I don't know, like I say, it was the first one I went to. I thought it was interesting. I think they had a lot of, one thing we wanted to get to, we couldn't even get into. They had the room blocked. There were so many people in that room. So people were actually attending. I've been to conferences all my life, and sometimes we go to the first meeting, and then you don't see us until the end of the day. But there were so many things that were going on. Mike and Pam and I had to kind of break up to see which sections we want to go to so that we could get as much information as we could to bring back. And so I just wanted to bring this back from a general standpoint so that we could look at it from a recycling standpoint to see if there's anything that we can do. I did see something really interesting, though, when we came back through the airport in Charlotte. They have recycling bins. They really elaborated what's supposed to be there. But when we got to Myrtle Beach, they do have recycling bins. We were glad to see that. But they are so common looking. I mean, you would not know you would not know how to, you just think they're all trash cans. You would think that they're 3 trash cans together. So I don't know if that's something, I don't know who developed them.
Those were developed by DHEC.
Okay,
DHEC developed those, and they sent them, airports were able to receive those at no cost through DHEC. So every airport in the state should have what you saw in Myrtle
Okay,
Beach.
I know a young lady down at the Charleston Airport that really runs that facility down there. And I'm gonna have this conversation with her, and maybe she can talk to DHEC about it. I'm glad that they decided to give us some recycling bins, but they need to be visible. Because if you go there, when we looked at it, we had to really look down and had a little sign about the size of this phone, not quite that big.
Right.
That says, so if somebody's getting off the plane and you got a plastic cup in your hand, you're not gonna take time to try to read that sign, you're
No.
gonna throw. But the one in Charlotte is in green and all kind of different colors. So
Shows what you can
shows what
recycle.
you recycle, and that's the way they're in Florida as well. They got them on school campus and that kind of stuff. So I don't know if that's something that we could work with DHEC or somebody, but at least they got to start.
I think, as I remember back, it wasn't real easy to get those simple cans in.
So-
No.
So we ought to be thankful that we got what we got.
But like
step.
Mike said, I will guarantee you that whoever pulls the plastic bags out of those, they're light gray, they're 2 right there together, and you see one little thing on top of it. I guarantee you that it would probably be half and half, trash in both
Oh, yeah.
of them, that they can't recycle anything in that because nobody knows what it is. They couldn't possibly. And you couldn't miss the other one. You couldn't miss it. And I don't know if you're gonna get into the marine or not.
Yeah, I'm headed to the Marines.
But this should show, I'm allergic to shellfish, and I don't really care
And
for
I
fish.
thought this was really interesting. This on page 12. Some of you can't read, but they're talking about the littering plastic in the ocean. And, I mean, this is, you can read it for yourself, but they're saying by 2025, the ocean will contain 1 ton of plastic for every 3 tons of fish. And
What year?
2025. But here's the real thing that got me from a health relation that they talked about. Because this plastic, the fish eats it, or it gets into the plankton, and the fish eat it, and all those BPTs that are in those plastic polymers are now in the fish. And so now we eating fish that are full of toxic substance, and a lot of the things that we see going on with health-related issues, we don't know if it's being traced back.
Yeah.
And you know, a lot of these other countries, Southern Korea, North Korea, those kind of places, they eat a lot of fish. Thailand, that kinds of place, and even here in the U.S. So we don't know, but that's a real issue, and for someone to realize, because not only is it, you're talking about polluting the oceans, and with all of this plastic and stuff, you're talking about now health problems that we may not be able to trigger back to see where it's coming from.
Right. And how do you reverse that kind of thing in decades or generations? You don't. And that's another reason why these manufacturers, everything that they make to package in should either be biodegradable, really biodegradable, not just what some of them say, or recyclable so that it doesn't end up here.
Yeah, and they really need to look. I used to work for a Corning Medical where we made Petri dish that we did. We used polyethylene plastics to make those Petri dishes, and it's the oils and the chemicals that we use to make the PVC to do this stuff that's causing the problems. So manufacturers and developers need to be looking at a way to make these without putting all these harmful chemicals in these plastics. And I think that's one of the things that they're doing Viola is looking at ways that they can recycle mold, reuse it, and reintroduce it back into, as a usable product. But that's one of the things that did. And I don't think I have that slide in here, I got it on my thing, but they were talking about by 2050, I think it is, that there would be more plastic in the ocean than fish.
That is a dog. When you, and I don't know if they mentioned it up there or not, but the area in the Pacific Ocean, an island of plastic
Yeah.
is floating around, it's bigger than the state of Texas.
Right.
That ain't something that somebody's made up. You can see it, it's there, but when you talk with the plastic folks and you talk to the lawyers, don't confuse me with the facts. But
Well,
it's amazing.
yeah, it's gotten to the point that if you're not an environmentalist, then the money should bother you. And the health problems yourself and your children and your grandchildren are gonna have. There are three good reasons: monetary, environmental, and health-wise. And your food chain, they went through a whole program showing you what your food chain in 2050 would be as far as from the ocean. And when you have more plastic in the ocean than sea life, we can't eat plastic. You can catch it, but you can't eat it.
Well, you shouldn't eat it.
You
We're eating it
You're eating it
today,
now.
But,
And some of the slides did not get in here. I'm looking at, but I do remember one that I wanted to talk about. It's not in here, but it was talking about food consumption. That 33% of food is lost before it even gets to your fork. But we thought I thought that was interesting because we talked to some people from Maryland who is doing composting with food. They make something called gold leaf or some kind of soil that they do. And they have come up with a way of collecting food waste and integrated it, and I think we started doing that the same thing. So some of the things that they're doing, we're already doing, but they're integrating that food waste into their compost. But I think we cover ours, and I think they let theirs cure out in the sun or whatever it is, in windrows like we do. But there was a lot of things. I mean, I'm just sitting here and going, they do a lot of things with sensors. I was keen on sensors because that's one of the things that my daughter did, with how do you measure food waste. And they put sensors in the actual bins so that they can do locations of where the bins are and those kinds of things. So it was a very interesting conference, but my takeaway is how do we deal and how do we increase our recycling efforts to make sure that we can keep stuff out of the landfill. And I thought these numbers may kind of help and show where the rest of the world is, where the U.S. is, and I think we're doing pretty good because some of them people that we talked to was having a hard time in doing things. So you guys have to be given a salute of praise for the kinds of things that we do here because some of the things we heard was kind of nightmarish to some of these landfills. And I put in here for the last thing because Pam just fell in love with it. And it's not the best picture, and I don't know what we're gonna do with it for recycling. Maybe she can tell us, but I want you to look at this water wheel. There's a water wheel in here that takes the trash out before it ever gets into the river, and that what it, that's what it, so Pam, I'm gonna let you expound on your water wheel.
Okay, they had one in the harbor. And you'll see the picture. It's circular, it reduces, it recycles, and it reuses. And this water wheel, and it looks really simple. I know nothing is simple anymore. And I know nothing is cheap anymore. But the water wheel, they had quite a few presentations on that. And it cleans up the harbor. And it cleans the rivers or whatever. And with the rivers and waterways, intercoastal waterway and the rivers, and they have the river sweep. And
Yeah, right.
everybody is doing these things now. I just really thought that water wheel, the way it worked and everything, that if you could put that out in the river and then move it and put it out in the waterway, I just think that's a neat thing to have. Don't you think we need one, Dan?
But
We could have solid waste authority recycle on the side of that, and then everybody in the river when they're out there and everybody in the intercoastal waterway would see how we're trying to clean that up. Now, I don't think it would work in the ocean. That thing would probably fall over.
Yeah, I don't think it'd work in the ocean, but I thought you would have an interest in the water wheel.
I did. I thought that was really a neat thing.
But I think the conference was good. I think they gave us some food for thought. They talked about building berms. One of the things they talked about was berms and how you could use recycled materials and clean waste to burn berms around your landfill. That may be something that we want to look into, talk about, look at. But it has to be clean stuff. But there was a lot of things that were thrown out that gives us food for thought.
That's true. That berm, I think I talked to you about it and the man's name. There were two men, and it was the last presentation. And throughout the 3 days, Mike was right, we had to get together and decide. And usually, there were 8 or 10 presentations at one time. So all three of us would go separate ways. They had to help me because it was in military time. Who would do a conference and put the times in military time? I mean, hardly anybody understood that. Everybody was going, do you know what time this is?
Strike 12 when you got
Yeah.
beat up, just strike 12.
Yeah, but I didn't go to the military. And so we had to sit down and plan these out. But I think it started at 5 or 5:30. It was the last presentation of the day, and it was an hour. I think we left at 6:30 to go get some dinner. But these two men have been working with the berms, and some of theirs were like, they're just as straight as that wall and right straight up. And then they said, well, some of the people didn't like that, didn't like the way it looked, so they made them a little rounder and a little shorter. But what really amazed me is that throughout 30-some states, they have gotten and worked with DHEC, so instead of us having to go buy dirt and pay to build that berm or to fill up bar pits and things, they have gotten recyclables or clean waste. And I'm wondering if some of the plastics that are not recyclable, they are clean waste to a degree. And he didn't really say the exact materials, but there were certain materials that they got passed in those states that they were getting paid to take this clean waste in. And it made these berms, so they were getting money just like you'd go and put it in the landfill, but they were using it on the inside of these berms. Now, that's amazing, because it would cost millions of dollars to buy dirt to make these berms that we would have to do there. So we need to talk to them and figure out if South Carolina is one of their states, and if it isn't, how we could work safely to do that, because they had to go through the environmental processes of each of these states to figure out the materials that they were getting paid that would actually build this berm. So not only didn't the berm cost them anything, they made money building this berm. And I just think we need to look into that.
I think I may have one slide that talks to what kinds of things that they had certified that can go in, and I'll pull that out and see if I can read it. That's all I have. Anybody, you got any other questions? Dan? Pam?
What are we gonna do about these harmful emissions from cows? I hear that they're really bad.
We're not gonna do anything with them. That's not considered either hazardous waste or garbage waste.
We're going to eat them.
That's considered, I used to work with a guy. I tell you what we can do. I had an Englishman that I used to work for, and what they used to do there in London, in Sudbury, they would take the cow dung and they would run it through a water trough and collect the water off of it, because that's where the bacteria is, and then they would use it for fertilizer. So if I get to the point where I've got a big mound like that, that's what I'll start doing. I'll start washing it and then spreading it back over the field.
You could just grind up Beano in their food.
But right now, I haven't had any complaints about that. So Dan, when you send me a memo.
I really am impressed with it. And you said Mike, I assume you said Mike Campbell as well. He go
Yeah.
with you.
Yeah, Mike did.
And I've been on trips with, y'all. I'm so glad that, our chair and our vice chair, and are you our treasurer or are you our
No,
secretary?
I'm just a board member that sits on the end. Danny has my seat right now.
But, anyway, we got our money's worth and, let's see. What's that scripture in the Bible about? Without vision, the people vanish or something like that. This is all very, pie in the sky type stuff, but we recognize that sooner or later, we're gonna be, because we have to be, where the European nations are. And it starts with discussions like these, and I'm glad you all go to these meetings and absorb it and take it in and bring it back. I'm impressed with the details of what you all are bringing.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just want you to know, we didn't get to see the ball of twine.
Is it still there?
I don't know.
Nobody mentioned the ball of twine.
We didn't hear about that, but
I'm
you know, I have figured out how to get board members to go to all the meetings from 8 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock at night. If you cancel the rent-a-car for the week and you take a cab to the hotel, they don't have anywhere else to go.
Well, we lucked out because it wasn't walking distance, but it was hot. Pam and Pam, Mike loves to walk. So you need a bicycle to keep up with him.
You take the boat ride out to, Francis Scott Key.
We did nothing but go to meetings, Dan.
And I brought the book. It got a lot of ads and it's got a lot of conferences. But you'll see that this thing was full of conferences, and they went from 8 o'clock in the morning
Yeah.
to 6 o'clock in the afternoon. So there wasn't much time for fun. I also brought back the fourth industrial revolution of waste management sectors. They got a lot of questions in here. I'm gonna leave this with Danny, and he may wanna just read through that and look at some of the questions and see if he agree or disagree with some of the things they had to say.
And that was an interesting keynote presentation that they had, because they said that we are now in the fourth industrial revolution, and I think they're right. When we're going to start doing our plan, that HDR will be doing the plan that we're doing, Danny, I've got one at home, but I'm glad you went ahead and brought it for him to be looking at, because it would cost us millions of dollars to do the studies to come up with the numbers that are in this thing right here. And they're giving us the expected impacts on our industry in this fourth industrial revolution, as far as robotics, the new innovations, all the way available to 2030. You will be amazed at this, but everyone that's in that committee and HDR needs to see this because of what it tells you in robotics and what is going to be the main thing that goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the percentages and what they did in there. We couldn't afford to do a study that would come out with the things in there.
Yes, there may be a link in there that you may be able to pull up online. I don't know, but I brought the book back just in case. Is there anything else for the good of the cause? If so, well, if not, I'll declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Great job with all of those slides and that. I'm so glad. You should have
Dan.
seen him sitting up there
Could
taking
you show
pictures.
me that, conceptual plan